again, I mentioned it earlier, Nakagami, and they talked about this on the British commentary as well. Once again, doing a typical Taka Nakagami almost, it's bad to say. And we were talking about this, I remember. It was one of the first questions I asked you in our very first podcast, or maybe it was second or third or something like that. But, Taka Nakagami, he shows the speed, but he can't keep it together when it really matters.
That's right. And even his team manager is Lucio Cecchinello, has been saying the same sort of things in public. And when your team manager says that in public, you know that that they are worried about it. I mean, it's because Nakagami, he's not a rookie anymore, is he? If he was making these mistakes in his first year, people would understand. But, he's an established rider now, and he's on the latest bike. He had everything there to make that step up, but he's just fumbling at the wrong time, and it's just adding, as you say, to Honda's problems this year. Pole began the weekend really well, didn't he? He was really quick on Friday. I know it was tricky conditions, but he looked like he was on form. And then suddenly that really strange accident, that massive accident that you don't see very often now, because normally the electronics catch those sort of on throttle high sides, don't they? And he was just catapulted off. So, as you're saying, the worst possible time with this really important test, just what, 5 days away now? I mean, Pole's going to be really sore, and and then you've got Marc, as you say. I mean, we were looking back on Crash to 2011 and everything that happened then, and it was about 4.5 months before he got back on a bike on that occasion, and he needed to have surgery. It was a local anaesthetic, so it wasn't a big job, but still they waited. I mean, Alberto Puig has been using the word patience a lot this weekend, isn't he? Because they're not really sure, and as Keith says exactly, it's not a bone, so they're really just they're not entirely sure how quickly it's going to heal, what they're going to need to do, what kind of treatment. The information has been really vague coming out of Honda, really brief. Keith says Marc's social media, very little about it at all. And then we got this one quote that's quite emotional for Marc, clearly showing that he's really down, and you can't really blame him, can you? Having gone through so much, and now in his head, he's recovered from bones and ligaments, isn't he? But now he's got this question mark of when will this recover? It's not a normal injury. And so, it's got to be a massive concern. I mean, if it follows the same sort of timeline as last time, then he could miss all of testing.
Imagine Honda are in trouble with Taka Nakagami. You can understand why they re-signed him. He's still got that potential, but he does seem to make a lot of unforced errors. Imagine how Suzuki feel. They've only got 2 blokes on 2 bikes, and Alex Rins just chucks it up the road. I mean, I was counting up his DNFs. And the amount of unforced error that Alex Rins makes is unbelievable. I don't know how he's going to get over them. I really don't, because it just seems that he just seems to make these mistakes when he really shouldn't do by now. You mentioned about being a rookie. Yeah, you can get away with it a bit as a rookie, I suppose. But pretty soon, the team are going to get pretty well cheesed off with it. I wonder what Davide Brivio will make of it if he does come back. The Alex Rins thing will have got by him, because there will have been decisions made for next year that Davide Brivio, if he comes back, is going to be saddled with, because he's then going to have to manage decisions that other people have made while he's been playing around in your game over in Formula One. Harry.
Yeah, and he hasn't been enjoying it, has he? But I'm just looking at the final standings. Alex Rins, 13th, 99 points. Joan Mir, 3rd, 208 points. And just looking at the numbers alone,
but he's had 6
Alex
DNFs,
Rins
Harry.
had got even close to that.
He's had 6 DNFs.
Yeah, I know, but that's the thing. If they had a rider on board that machine who was, even close to Joan Mir, think where they would be in the standings as well. Because although this weekend Ducati have sealed the team's championship as well, Suzuki have clearly made a big jump in Valencia and in the last couple of rounds, haven't they? They're on the up, but they need both riders to be on form.
You've only got two riders, one team, 2 riders, and you've got 8 Ducatis next year. You're going to have 4 Yamahas next year. You are up against it. It's a situation that really you wouldn't expect. Suzuki have thrown a lot of money and a lot of effort into this Grand Prix situation. When they came back, it was a real mountain for them to climb, and they climbed it. They got right there, done a brilliant job, but it just seems to fail on this front, that we don't have the same pool that they don't have, the same pool of riders to dip into. I mean, Jorge Martin is a great example, a rookie. He's won the rookie championship in the end this year. I know it doesn't count for much for most people and all the rest of it, but he's done it. Ducati have won the manufacturers. They won the team's championship as well. So Ducati are on a massive up at the moment. Okay, they didn't win the Riders' World Championship, watch out next year, because I tell you what, they've got some quick guys on what are going to be some bloody fast motorbikes. If they can make them, I love looking at watching their TV this afternoon. I rolled it back a bit to have a look at some of the Casey Stoner interviews. I love Casey Stoner. I've always loved Casey Stoner. I love his perspective, of what's going on and where he sees it. And, there were several things that he said that just amazed me. And one of them was about the anomaly that is Ducati at Valencia, that it works at Valencia. And we've seen it over years. It's a motorbike that just shouldn't turn as well as it does on a go-kart track like Valencia. But somehow he makes it work, Pete.
And I have to say, two riders that were absolutely agreeing with what you're saying now, being completely worried about these Ducatis next year, Joan Mir and Fabio Quartararo. Mir was extremely down, to put it mildly, in his debrief. You would think, on paper, not a bad result, 4th place, but he was just seemed to be shocked at the step Ducati had taken at this particular track. Even he was really worried, and Quartararo the same. He's pushing Yamaha as well and saying, look, this is not supposed to be a Ducati track. You've got a 1-2-3 lockout. We're going to have to take a step here, because next year there's 8 of these bikes on the grid. So both of them, it was almost, you could swap them around, and their comments would be almost the same to their manufacturers, which is, we've got to get on terms with these Ducatis, because they're starting to pull away. You can't just say, there's a long straight, the Ducatis will be quick here. Look at Portimao, look at Valencia. I mean, yeah, genuinely, Mir and Quartararo really, really down this evening.
8 bikes, 8 riders, 8 lots of data. And with a team that are right across it. Nowadays, one thing Gigi Dall'Igna did when he came into that team was he brought all the elements together. It wasn't the factory versus the race team versus the riders, which you had before. There was always a disparity. There was always something that didn't quite gel. Dall'Igna's skill, for me, has been bringing all of those together. And also, the recognition since that Casey Stoner was absolutely brilliant. I mean, I love some of his comment about Valentino Rossi, for instance. He said, all that partying and shouting and hollering and jumping up and down and all the rest of it. He said, it used to kind of put me off. It was there to destabilize other people. Of course it was. That's another element to Valentino. He's psychological as well as on the track. He's brilliant at all aspects of things. Casey's skill was on the track. Casey's skill wasn't as a personality or as a getting into the head game situation. He just rode a motorbike. He said at the weekend that he preferred qualifying to racing, because you could get the tiniest extra bit out of it in qualifying. In a race situation, you had other people interfering with your fast laps and so on and so forth. You had other things to think about. He said he really enjoyed the qualifying side of it. And listening to him, he got shut down fairly quickly, because there was a rather large Valentino fan that was obviously presenting that particular show. And she was keen not to allow Casey to pee on Valentino's parade when it came to all the jumping and jerking about, because obviously, and at the end of the day, people were working out what their best Valentino moments, and somebody actually went there and said, well, it was when Casey walked down pit lane and wandered into Valet's garage and said, your talent was outweighed by your ambition, or your ambition, I don't know which way around it goes, but anyway, I never had any ambition or any talent, so it didn't matter.
Well,
I was just going to say that's what made their rivalry so great, wasn't it? Because you had Casey, who was just the ultimate raw talent, and then you had Valentino, who was the ultimate complete racer, and you had these two, opposing people, personalities. Everything was different about them, and yet they could ride a motorcycle around a track within, nothing of each other. So yeah, they both brought each other up, and as Casey is sort of saying now, that racing against Valentino and beating him, it's just made Casey's stock sort of rise among everyone.
It's great. I think this day really has been great from the point of view to see how many people outside of now the competition respected each other for their individual particular personas. I mean, Casey Stoner and Valentino Rossi have been photographed several times this weekend, arm around each other, respecting each other. That's the way it should be. Biaggi has done, various others have done. The only one that I have seen that I've seen before, footage of an interview that was done with Valentino Rossi when he was talking about his competitors and which ones and all the rest of it. How long will it be before you can get over the 2015 situation with Marc Marquez? And he said, 20 or 30 years. Which I remember thinking that runs probably deeper than even I thought it ran. But there you go.
Oh God. Well, let's. Well, we're going to come on to some. Lots of questions that come in, and we've got a few regarding Rossi, but I think we will come back to those ones at the end of the show because Malcolm has got in touch. Actually, and we were talking about Ducati, and Malcolm, I know, is a regular listener, so thank you, Malcolm. He asks, do you guys think that Ducati, being Ducati, will move Jack and put Jorge into the factory team?
Well, the thing is, they've got a choice, haven't they? They can. I hate getting into the speculation situation sometimes because it's they see things differently to how we see them. They see the full 360-degree circle of what's going on, and they put together the elements within each and every team, if you like, crew chief to technicians to data loggers, and so on and so forth. Jorge Martin's caused the biggest problem at the moment. Won a race. 4 poles. He's a rookie, for God's sake. He's coming to MotoGP on a motorbike that's supposed to be on the second string, and he's kicking butt. He split the 2 factory boys at the weekend, been part of the first ever Ducati factory podium lockout. We've only just had the first ever Ducati, front row, for instance. That's only just happened this year as well. So, it's not just the talent in the team; it's the talent on the bikes at the moment. And Jorge Martin, you got to remember, he was throwing up all night last night. He was sick all night long. He was a really, really sick, and he could only just make the press conference this afternoon after the race because he was still being sick. So the guy physically was weakened. And 27 laps of Valencia, there ain't nowhere to go to sleep at Valencia, believe me. You're on it pretty much all of the way. There was a bit of time down the front straight, but that is it. So, I mean, he did brilliantly well. Set pole position, pinched it. Bagnaia, he spent too much time pulling Rossi around, perhaps, when he should have been concentrating on a to-be teammate sometime later on. I just think Ducati have managed to put themselves in a position with the sanction of all the other teams. This has to be agreed amongst the factory teams. They all have to agree what's going on in the rules and in the makeup of things nowadays. And to allow Ducati to have 8 bikes on the grid, right from day one, struck me as not right. And if I would have been Suzuki, I'd have been forcing somewhere to get another couple of Suzukis on the grid. The grid isn't going to be expanded in size. They're not going to give another couple of spaces. They might, I suppose. Dorna can do whatever they like. It's their ball. They can kick it where they like. But it comes down to money. And Suzuki, at the end of the day, Hamamatsu, they don't want to spend that kind of dosh. They're already committed to a huge amount of money. And the bike is almost there. It's almost right there. But good to see Mir back on the kind of form we'd expected him. And didn't them Suzuki's in that last couple of sets, turns 13, which is where Pol Espargaro launched himself over the top. That turn 13, it's one of them ones as a rider, believe me. You come over there on the gas with the thing drifting sideways, and then you've got to transit that while you're absolutely wheel spinning and God knows what. You've got to get it stopped for a second gear virtual hairpin over a rise where it's all sideways on. Then you've got to get the weight transited to the front. Then you've got to get into the stopping department. Mate, that is a scary old corner. It's one that I've always been impressed with. And the Yamaha and the cross-plane bikes, the across-the-frame 4s, just seem to have real advantage going into that final corner. I loved it. The Suzukis just look so good into there. So I love the fact that we've got these different types of formats, if you like, of motorbike. We've still got the cross-plane, the 4-cylinder across-the-frame bikes, and we've still got the V4s. That are competing with each other in different parts of the racetrack. But I just think the amount of data and the amount of advantage that 8 bikes on the grid is going to be over the rest is almost obscene.
It's an absolute, it's they might well storm it next year. Who knows? I'll tell you who we haven't talked about, or not. Well, that would be embarrassing, wouldn't it?
That's the great thing about MotoGP. The rider still makes the difference. That's the difference between being in a Red Bull, Christian Horner thingy, Adrian Newey, I should say. Christian Horner's just a mouthpiece. Sorry, I meant Adrian Newey, or the Mercedes. I mean, if you're in one of those 2 cars, you're going to be half a second a lap quicker than anyone else. Whereas on a bike, the bike might be capable of being half a second quicker than anyone else, but you still got to be able to ride the bloody thing. And you see sometimes riders just seem to be able to put together something a little bit special. Was the Ducati the best bike when Casey Stoner was riding it? I don't think so. I think Casey Stoner made the difference. Do I sound like a
You
Casey
do.
Stoner fanboy?
We're getting him on the show, maybe, I think. I think that's the only way to go in the Christmas break. I just want to talk about KTM because we haven't really touched on them, and because Chin Maya has asked a question about them. And, where did they end up in the end? Brad Binder 7th, and then, Miguel Oliveira 14th, Iker Lecuona 15th, and as we discussed, Petrucci last of the runners. And Chin Maya has said, if KTM don't pull their socks up, surely they're at risk of losing all the talent they've nurtured so far. And the ones to come. Brad and Miguel are getting wasted with KTM.
Well, they lost their concessions. That's the detail that I'm talking about with Aprilia. Aprilia have had concessions and haven't really made enough of inroads to everyone else's advantage. Although they've like I say, they've tagged onto the back of the front runners now, Aprilia. But now concessions are going to be changed again for next year. KTM lost their concessions when they were making that kind of impression on everybody. And they seem to have lost their way a little bit. I mean, you've got a situation next year as well where, the factory, second factory team, if you like, of Raul Fernandez and Remy Gardner, the new world champ. That's going to be a fairly formidable team. Raul Fernandez is special. He has been incredibly good in this second half of the season as a rookie. Again, I think, have we seen anybody that good? I don't think we have actually. I don't think even Marc Marquez was that good in Moto2 compared with Raul Fernandez. He's pretty special, and he's going to KTM, or staying with KTM and going up to MotoGP, as is Remy. KTM have got to step up, but they will. I think out of all the teams, I worry about the funding of say, Suzuki, and I worry about the funding of Aprilia. Engineering and innovation comes from cash, pretty much, and being prepared to spend it. KTM have proved already that they are prepared to spend it. And if they want to move the next step, they're going to have to, I wonder what they've got in the locker for their innovation for these 7 tests. Next week is going to be so bloody exciting. I mean, how the hell can you get wet over a test? Well, I can.
But Pete, what do you think as well? Because it was also, let's not forget, Iker Lecuona's final race in MotoGP 4 now in the Tech 3 KTM. Have any of them said anything in post-race debriefs? How are they all feeling come the end of the season?
I think, as Keith says, it comes back to the concessions thing, and this was the first time they had concessions coming into this season. So what we're going to see is, are they quick learners or not? Because what should happen is, I think they're going to realise, well, they do realise something went wrong this year, and they're going to know how to approach the whole system of not being able to test during the season, of not being able to change your engine. They're going to know which way they need to go when they pick parts for next year. Perhaps they went a bit too conservative. We don't know. Were they a bit careful because the less engine changes this year, things like that. But they've got all the data from this year. And so now we'll see. We'll expect them to. We've seen other factories make sort of a blip with concessions. We saw Suzuki do it when the year after Maverick Vinales won for them. They lost concessions. They then picked the wrong engine, if you like. It was the momentum or something inside. The inertia was too much, and they struggled that year. But they learned from it, and they've been really careful. You can see it perhaps is reflected by how careful they are with their technical choices now. That maybe frustrates the riders a bit, that things don't come online a bit sooner. But I think it all sort of dates back to where they got caught out a bit last time things were frozen. So this was a new experience for KTM this year. They have struggled with it more than people thought. It looked like they Mugello time. They had that great run with Oliveira. He won in Catalonia. It looked like they turned the corner with the chassis and the tyre allocation, but then it seems to have they've gone backwards. I think they realised that it wasn't the solution they thought it was, and that the key problem was always there. But we'll see from next week, as Keith says, if they really understand what the heart of the problem was. This is when we'll get to see it. But the problem they've got is that it's so much harder to because of the testing's reduced, it's so much harder to find the cause of the problem and correct things. Keith's been saying they're going to have to go with the other big factories now. Just a few days of testing, you want to have everything planned almost to the minute of what you're going to go through to make sure you get these answers. And then what if it rains or something? You then have to think on your feet, and what do you prioritize? So big test coming up for KTM.
But they do have great riders across the board. Like Ducati, they have got numbers to help them with that. Whereas, Honda are in trouble. Their main men are injured, and they started injured. Nakagami, is he going to be able to test what they really want to test to the nth degree? Probably not. So on and so forth. Suzuki, they're stuck with what they've got. Whereas KTM do have a few people on the grid that are capable, that are fast. I know a couple of them are rookies to MotoGP, but we've seen what happened in the Moto2 situation this year. One of those rookies went pretty well. And I've got the feeling he might do it again next year on a MotoGP bike, and I'm really excited by that.
It is really exciting to see the new talent coming into MotoGP. Let's park it there though for the minute and talk about Moto2 then, because that was where the World Championship was crowned. It was Raul Fernandez who won the race ahead of Fabio Di Giannantonio and Augusto Fernandez, but it was Remy Gardner who did manage to take the title, finishing in 10th place, and at one point was falling down into 11th and was looking a little bit vulnerable and really starting, I think everyone was getting on the edge of their seats there thinking, oh dear, is this actually going to come undone for Remy? But he didn't do it. We did do it, even, I should say. And he is world champion in Moto2, an Australian world champion. He's done it again, Keith, for the Australians after, I think, who was the last one for Australia? It's been a while.